So welcome to today's episode. Our guest today is Kelly Gardner. Kelly Gardner is the founder of Conscious Man Brotherhood. He has been for over 20 years in drama therapy, helping children and later also fathers in transformational work. Now he's a mentor and coach in transformational men's work. He's also a producer of conscious documentaries and an inspirational speaker. He helped thousands of men transform their lives and become better men, better fathers, and eventually kings. So welcome, Kelly.
Wow, man, that was beautiful. I feel like when you get that kind of hype, you're like supposed to come out of the ring, jumping around, bouncing. Like, all right, thank you for that lead in. I felt really beautiful. Like, is that me? Am I that guy?
Definitely.
Such a pleasure to be here with you, brother.
Do you want to experience the full potential of your sexual energy, deep intimacy in your relationship, and how it feels like to truly be in your power as a man? Can you hear the world's desperate calling for conscious, heart-centered men to rise to the occasion? Then welcome to the Heart of a King podcast, where you will find the clarity, guidance, and tools that will empower you to do what it truly takes to live a life of freedom, fulfillment, and bliss. Yeah, I would like to start us out with asking you, since you've been working with men for quite a while, like, what do you see are some of the biggest challenges men are facing these days?
You notice I've got the mustache here for November, talking about what men are struggling with externally and physically, and the disease, which, roots in the emotional experiences that we are having. And I guess I would say overall, men that I am seeing and working with and seeing reflected even in our media today are suffering with an inability to access and find safe places to display their emotions, to really connect with how they're feeling. And that suppression of emotion and feeling has to come out somewhere.
Yeah,
every
definitely.
Feeling is an energy. It needs to move. It needs to move through and with us. And most oftentimes, they're here to teach us and guide us, guide me. They have been there to guide me to discovering who I am and what it is that I am here to do. What is really the greatest part of fulfillment that I experience. And so that fundamental disconnection from my feelings and the language of my feelings and connection to those feelings result in making choices to climb the ladder of ego fulfillment and greater gratification and carrying the burden of responsibility, because that's what I'm told is supposed to be as a man, and to not express the challenges that I'm experiencing, and to shoulder those alone, and to find myself in isolation. And so instead of that connective tissue of feelings that brings us together and unites us through our courage and vulnerability, we're separated by egoism and this notion that I need to do it all by myself, and that I don't need to feel or express my feelings, but the expression of my feelings makes me weak. And that underlying structure leads to not only the depression, anxiety, and suicide that we're experiencing from men today, but also on the flip side, I see that as the anger turned to sadness turned inward, but outwardly we're seeing societies with rampant sexual assault and abuse, war and aggression unchecked, because again, that energy has nowhere to go. So we as a planet, as a people, are suffering because men are suffering, and men are suffering because men are suffering from what fundamentally comes back to a disconnection to our feelings and what's alive emotionally inside of us.
I really resonate with that, and that's also why I am really focusing on helping men awakening their hearts and really reconnecting to their emotions. How would you describe the root cause of this? Where do you think that comes from, and what would you tell men, or what can men do about this that you would suggest?
Well, it hasn't always been this way, and yet there have always been challenges. I think to look back on any period of time and say it was better back then is fundamentally conservative, and I don't really think that it really was better overall. It might have been better in certain ways, and what can we preserve of those ways that might have served us, and how can we utilize what we know now to also serve us, a mixture of the ancient wisdom and modern medicine. um, Now, at the root, what we're experiencing right now, I think in many ways goes back to industrialization, and the
Mm,
movement of individuals out of familiar family structures, where there was, a certain support and integration of community into a mechanized system of society where science would solve all of our problems. And we see that with, our farming and the challenges that show up in that way. But we also see it in the breakdown of the social structures, of the family structures, of the apprenticeship structures, of the the communal raising of the individual. Um, in our individualistic self, we have um, put all the pressure on a parent or two parents at best, and taken away the grandparents and the extended families and the community that comes to raise the soul, which is an individual. And so in that, we are raising only the understanding of myself and my ability to take care of myself in this society where no one is here for me. I am alone as an individual. That individualism is also that drive and that strength, but that without the collective sense, without that sense of community ownership and collective socialism, if you will, uh, I think that individuals are lost. And so I talk a lot about the difference between a ecocentric society and an egoic society, a society where people are rooted to their fundamental wisdom in the land, in what the natural world is here to remind us of our traditions and how to be with all of my relations, my relationships to myself, to the people around me, to the birds, to the animals, to the trees, that we are all integrated in one entity, Uh,
yeah.
and so from that, we drive the soul's journey. What is my soul here to do, and how is it an integral part of that ecosystem? Versus an egoic society where the fundamental goal is the preservation of the self, is to build a strong container, and to continue to feed that container with consumption,
Mm,
which is further validation of self, which is all important, right? Consumption is what keeps my body here. I'm not anti-consumption or consumerist
mhm.
or anything like that. I mean, let's go get it. Uh, but to what end? And if that is a very juvenile state where I need to take care of myself and my body, and that is an important state of becoming a child to an adult where I can take care of myself. There's grown men all over this planet that put them in the wilderness, they couldn't take care of themselves for 10 seconds. Have no idea how to
Yeah.
actually survive or to thrive for that matter.
Mm,
And so that's an important element of our growth, of how to take care of this body, this self, this to generate income, to create wealth, to preserve it.
mm,
But that only takes me to the first half of life. And then the next half, I truly believe, is about discovering why I'm here. What is my purpose for being on this planet? What is my unique seed of this great infinite expression of life and love? What is it here for? What is it going to do? How is it going to be? And how is that way of being going to affect the world that I want to live in? Right? And as men, particularly, that fulfillment, that belief that I'm a part of something, that I'm contributing to the world that I want to live in, is so fundamental to my fulfillment. You
Yes.
know?
That reminds me of something you once said about purpose, that in the end, our purpose is always about serving God through love. And that is obviously an individual expression for every single human being. But that's basically what it comes down to, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My good friend Preston Smiles often says, love is all there is, was, and ever will be. And the answer to every question is love. Um, and by the way, I should say he's really the founder of Conscious Man Brotherhood. He gave me the title of founding father, but he truly was the founder of Conscious Man Brotherhood in all ways. Um, and yes, it does always come back to that one simple question, which is, love is all there is, was, and ever will be. Love is that expression of divine consciousness. It is that one that we talk about. And I have this belief, and a lot of it comes from Conversations with God by Neil. Neil,
Donald Walsh.
what's that?
Neil Donald
Neil
Walsh.
Walsh. Exactly. Thank you. I thank you. Looked at his name for a second. A lot of it comes from that book, which really resonates with me in such a deep way. This idea that I am part of this divine experience, and that seed of life that exists inside of me, that is part of the divine, that I call my soul, has all of the DNA, all of the building blocks of the divine itself. It is all knowing. So I then am all knowing. But in this expression, in this experience, I don't know anything. So why? Why did I choose to come here and forget everything that I knew? Well, if I know everything, that's kind of it's like the know-it-alls. I raise my hand on that one. It's not that much fun to know it all. What's fun is the experiencing of it all. And so, if we're here to experience it all, then all of it is love. All of it.
Yes.
All of it. Especially the challenges, especially the falls, especially the crap that shows up in my life, because without it, I wouldn't get to experience the other side of it.
Yes. And in
That-
all that, how would you say, like in a practical human expression as a man, how can we love like a king from this mature space?
yeah. Wow. That's that is a lifelong journey, and there's many different aspects or different ways of answering that question. Right? There's the energetic
Yeah.
of the king. Right? How do I carry that energy of king, of divine masculine, of leadership, of vision, of purpose? These are the qualities of king that I get to bring to um, to this world, to my way of being, to my way of loving. And then there's the stage of life that we might refer to as the king, where my responsibility is not just to me or to my community, but to the greater than life community, to all living things, to be a part of the all, the love that I refer to as the agape, that love for the divine, for that union, for everything.
Yeah.
Um, and I look forward to seeing that one day. It's like I hold this goal for being able to levitate, right? I sit there and meditate, and one day I'm going to levitate, right? It's probably not in this lifetime, but I think that's the part of loving. It's the attachment to the work with no attachment to the outcome. Uh, it is really just holding that higher goal of how my life contributes to the wholeness of all of life.
Yeah.
And if my goal is big enough that I'll never get to see it, then that sounds like it's a lot of fun to me. I get to love so big that I'll never get to love enough. And I'll just wither away and float off into the galaxy to come back and try again, right? Uh, and so, the long and short answer of it is, as I figure out how I contribute, and I seek to be that
Yeah.
contribution, and find more ways to do that, and create ripples for that to have its greatest impact, while also remembering to be in love every day, to stop and smell the roses, to enjoy my physical body, to enjoy sex. We got to get on
Yes.
that conversation. To enjoy, the lila, the sweetness, the
Yeah, the
all.
sensuality of this human experience. The
Absolutely.
juiciness of it. Yeah. Beautiful answer to that question. Do you see anything in particular showing up if we talk more about the expressions of love in relating to the amore and eros? If you see,
Mhm.
how can we as a man really show up in that space from your perspective as a king
Mm.
in our intimate relationships with, I would
Mhm.
now take the example with a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean,
What are
Amore
you
is
seeing
a.
there?
Yeah, yeah. So, and that's one that I'm always on the journey to discovering and unearthing more, and learning more, and certainly will not ever claim to be an expert in that area. I think that what I am really speaking to when I talk about Amore is really the expression of that divine union of souls through the intertwinement of two souls or three souls, or whatever, your version of that romantic relationship looks like. Um, it's how I get to express and experience that. There's the theoretical of we are all one, but then put me actually in the physical, emotional space of another person, and have to find a way, and seek to find a way to intertwine that. That is kind of it's the practice. It's like, I think of, if all of life is a yoga, right? It's an expression of life, right? There's eight limbs to yoga, many different practices, and relationship is kind of like the asana. In the West, we think of yoga as asana, the movement of the body, right? And it's like relationship, the amore is like, it's like the asana. It's where I get to practice. It's my gym. It's the place where I get to see all of my mirror reflections showing up, and really pointing to all of my deepest growth and my traumas, and all of it. It's my dojo. It's my playroom. Um, and to remember that, and to be in that, and know that it is always about me and not about the other person so much, at least, at the very least, acknowledge that it's not nearly as much about them as I think it might be. I
Hmm.
have thought it is. More often than not, it's mostly about me. And that's how I practice the yoking of souls, of coming together, of finding that beautiful dance, um, physically, mentally, emotionally, where the sum of our parts, our whole, is greater than the individual parts. That somehow that divine dance creates magic. Uh,
It does, yeah.
and that gets to the eros, right? Which is, the divine dance of magic, which, I lay down my hands, or hold up my hands, whichever tradition we come to those who have a greater level of mastery than myself, in really discovering that path to greater soul connection through eros, through tantra, and sexual kung fu, and all of the different practices. I look forward to really fully experiencing and expressing that divine union with another soul, and touching God in many ways, the
Mm.
divine, through that expression. And so, I think all of them really come down to practice, right?
Yes.
It's through the expression, and through the practice, the experiencing of what I did wrong, that I learned how to, get better and better, and closer and more effective at what it is that I'm seeking to achieve.
Yes, to that. And yeah, I feel in intimate relationships, that practice, like you said, it always shows up as having that mirror reflection in front of us. The closer we get, the cleaner the mirror, and the straighter the reflection, and sometimes the more painful, but also the more transformative and evolving for our soul and our being. I found it to be. And yeah, I see for us men in this whole work, I feel vulnerability, as you mentioned, is a huge part in really being vulnerable with ourselves in front of other men, to really have a space to be vulnerable and practice that vulnerability, to really yeah, I feel that is where our true power lies, and not in kind of putting up a facade of like, I'm so tough, I don't feel anything. It's like, I feel that is a big practice. And yeah, and I just see that also showing up in relationships. What really crafts that authentic connection is that way of just being courageous enough to show up in that vulnerable space of being transparent, not playing games, not putting shields up, not trying to keep our hearts closed so we don't get hurt. So I feel that is a huge practice there, and that brings brings us real intimate connection and relationship.
Yeah, it very much does. And that is a double-edged sword, I would say, in relationships. There is a balance, or a trap in some ways, in looking at that vulnerability in, for example, a men's group, versus the vulnerability that I hold in my relationship.
Exactly, yeah.
And um, you know there's something so powerful about being in a men's group and having the opportunity to express all of those things that I don't want people to know about me, to be able to offload that weight and know that I'm just another man. Good, bad, right, wrong, indifferent, doesn't really matter. I'm just another person in this space. And having the distance from the other men emotionally, knowing that really, whatever is coming up it's about me, it's not about you, because I don't really know you that well. I mean, we hold deep space for each other, but if I'm pissed off, it's probably about something else, right? So I can have that space to just witness another man without having to make it my own, without being able to recognize that that's his stuff, that's what he's going through. In relationship, it's different because we are intertwined with our beloved, and so if something hurts me, it's more difficult for them to have the emotional space to go, oh, that's his stuff, that he's working on it, or her stuff, whatever relationship is, and uh, I don't have to worry about that. What really comes up is, oh shit, he's going through this. What does that mean for me? How is that going to affect me? And how is that going to affect my relationship? And, we often talk about the masculine and feminine primary needs. And this is oversimplified. And again, I'm not talking about men or women here. I'm just talking about if we were to ascribe different energetics to the qualities to the energetic of masculine and feminine. Then the need of the feminine is safety, and the need of the masculine is freedom. Right? Those are the ones that come up most frequently in my experience. And so, if I come home to a feminine partner and I express my vulnerability and all of the challenges that I'm facing, and I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to meet the needs that are on my back and on my shoulder, then my partner receives that and goes, oh shit, we're in trouble. Oh God, and the response is not the same response that I get in my men's group, right?
Exactly.
And that doesn't mean that I don't want to share this with my partner. Vulnerability with my partner is really important. I want to be as open and transparent, but also my communication is only as effective as how it is received. I can say some really beautiful words, but if the other person doesn't even speak the same language, my communication isn't that effective. I have to be aware of how it's received.
Yeah.
And so, yes to vulnerability, but yes to knowing when and where that vulnerability in my relationship um, has the emotional separation in the space for it to be about me or it to be about us. Because I think oftentimes I come in and I offload whatever's showing up in my space in the relationship, and it suddenly becomes about us when it was just intended to be about me.
Mm. Yeah,
And
that's definitely not the way to go, to offload that um as men to our partners, especially as it basically threatens their base need of safety for a feminine partner. So yeah, totally agree
And
with that.
like I said, every person's different. So it's knowing your partner, right?
Exactly.
Knowing how this will land with your partner, with the individual that I'm speaking to, because I truly believe that man, woman, we all range on a scale of masculine and feminine. We all have both of these energies, and some of
Exactly.
us show up in different areas. I've had partners who are, live in their masculine, and certain areas I need to address them in that way. But also recognizing that for the romantic part of my relationship to exist, for that union to be enthralled, there needs to be polarity.
Yes.
There needs to be that attraction of the masculine and feminine. If we're both coming at it at the masculine, it's not working. If we're both coming at it with the feminine, it's not necessarily working either, right? And so
Exactly. Yeah.
finding when I need to have that polarity, you know, when I need to surrender, or when I need to push,
Yeah, I
is
see
very
that like the poles of a magnet. Literally, if the same poles, they repel each other. But if you have the
important.
opposing masculine, feminine sides, they literally attract each other and creates that spark of attraction, which
Hmm.
is very essential, I feel,
Yeah.
for
And with the other caveat is that I do believe that there are people on this planet that are both poles, like they're right dab in the middle. They exude both, the polarities of both at the same time, and they're interesting characters. You know, so I think there's an exception to every rule, and not
yes.
to put anybody in a box, but because our sexuality is complicated and beautiful, and part of this magical gift of life that I am here to express and to experience.
Let's dive into that a little bit. In the very beginning, you mentioned as some of the biggest challenges that show up, and also the biggest shadow expressions being, for example, sexual assault showing up and things like this, because I feel that it is super essential, especially in these times, that we as men address the shadow expression or the unconscious expression of maybe suppressed or of our sexuality, that we can really make that conscious and take our power back there and express it in a way that enriches our lives and the lives we touch. So do you see that being an important thing as
No,
well?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've had a lot of different experiences around this topic, but what has come clear for me in my experience is first of all, we experience men um, most often as perpetrators of sexual assault, and the general um, zeitgeist belief held behind sexual predators and predation is that it's men who are perpetrating sexual assault, and I think that is very true in many ways. And I think I go back to the notion that hurt people, and more oftentimes than not, the perpetrators are victims themselves, and not to excuse the behavior or to say that that's a reason for, but to paint a more clear picture of what we're really looking at. And my experience holding men's circles and having intimate and deep conversations with men in many aspects, is including some of the work that I did last year in the prisons, is that uh, the rate of sexual assault that men are victims of is far, far higher than we even uh, are able to count,
Hmm.
because it goes so unreported, as all sexual assault goes unreported. But what I'm seeing is that the numbers are rather staggering. Whenever I hold a circle and we get to a point where we really talk about our deepest shame, I'm rarely surprised I'm surprised if less than 50% of the men have a story about their own sexual assault. More often than not, it's the majority of the men in that space will have a story or a conversation to be had about their being a victim of sexual assault. And quite a few men sharing being the perpetrator of such acts. And at the core of that, I do believe that it comes back to the society that we live in and how we treat sex and sexuality as a puritanical society that has an overriding morality that sex is bad, that sex is something that doesn't have a healthy place to be witnessed outside of the birthing of a child. Then these sexual desires and urges can't exist in the light, they go into the dark. And that energy that is created in the dark has impacted our society as a whole. The collective unconscious is experiencing its sexuality in the darkness, and not the beautiful candle lit darkness of a Bali hut. It's that darkness that we run from and we hide from. And our collective experience of pornography as the prevailing message of sexuality is one of deep sadness and darkness. And there's a lot of pain and anger that exists within that system that we are taking on as a society when we consume that. It's like consuming a cow that has been raised on a feedlot. You're not just consuming that meat, you're also I'm consuming that energy.
Exactly.
And so we are collectively consuming this dark sexual energy on a regular basis. And that is indicative of the society that I live in. Where sexuality and predation come hand in hand, where it's about conquest and about taking and raping and taking advantage of. The majority of the stories that are played out in that world of sexuality are about power, and we're equating power and power over with sex and sexuality, and that's dangerous and that's dark, and it says a lot about who we are collectively as a society.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing this. And I feel just now, especially when you connected sexuality to power, that's ultimately where it, in my opinion, comes down to, why we are experiencing this complete suppression, distortion, just completely trying to disempower people sexually, basically. Because the book Think and Grow Rich, where they also speak about transmuting sexual energy, this is what it comes down to, in my opinion. Sexual energy is the most powerful energy in the universe, period. It is the life force energy. It is what creates life. It is what manifests everything into existence. It is what manifests our physical beings into existence and everything that we create from it. So I feel that is where this all comes from, the distortion, suppression of sexual energy. And that's been going on for centuries. And we are just in really exciting times where the truth is really coming through, where more and more people and men are finding the truth and seeing that their sexuality is actually sacred. There is nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to suppress. If it is conscious, it will never hurt anyone. I feel it is so important that we reclaim our sexual power and have it in alignment with our hearts, because that's when we are connected to the greater whole, and that's when we do not cause harm from it, but we do what I feel very much is our purpose here, which is serving God through love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever I call that, whatever word I use for that, I get to serve that experience. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You remind a quote that was on the wall where I first started doing drama therapy, a place called Living Stage in Washington, D.C. We had quotes all over the wall. And there was
Yeah.
one that was an anonymous quote that those who cannot create must own and destroy. And that really just landed for me in a whole new way when you were saying that, and knowing and the connection to my sexual, my generative energy is that ability, that unique ability to create
Yes.
life, to be God as God. Not that, my children are not my children. They are their own life, but
Yes.
to create, the act of creation of art, to make something where there was no thing, you know um, and those if I am disconnected from my ability to create, my only way to survive in this world is to own things. If I can't make things, I have to own things or destroy things, and in the destruction of those things I have new things, right?
Mm.
So it's so much it's such a control of the individual to disconnect me from my own ability to generate life, right? If I can't generate my own, then I have to own somebody else's. So now I become a
Mm.
consumer, right? And I break things down and I create trash and generate that, and I become, in the matrix, I become that little pod that's connected up to the
Mm.
server that's generating the energy, right? I become a pawn in that great piece because I'm ultimately disconnected from my own generative power, my own sexuality.
Mm.
Wow. It's like,
Wow, yes.
when I look at it that way, it's like, that's kind of an intelligent design to put together a society in that way, where
Yeah.
I disconnect people from their own sexuality, so now they can't create their own. They don't
Yes.
believe they can create their own. They're not connected to their energy of creating their own, and so they must buy mine. Wow,
Yes. There,
that's a
that's how it
smart
shows up.
thing.
But what's even smarter is conscious human beings that are waking up and seeing through the bullshit.
Yeah.
And that is the truth, that we do have this power within us all along. And this is the power of creation. And this is the most beautiful thing, I feel, to discover that and to break through the resistances that hold this generative, creative life force, sexual energy back. What is holding this back? For example, I grew up in a very conservative part of Germany, Catholic church, everything. Like sexuality was something super suppressed, shamed, blamed, even made like fear around that, all of that, judged. So that is a lot of things that show up there already often in our childhood from society. So, and then we get bombarded from marketing and distorted views about sexuality and what men are supposed to act like and be like in movies and Hollywood. Obviously, at some point, we get to know porn these days, if we're like, I don't know, teenage years or whatever. And that is just such a limited, distorted, physical only based version of sex that is shown there. Is very much about taking what you shared. It's very much about using the other person's body to unconsciously masturbate in a way. So that is not the divine expression of sexuality. That is nothing to do with the richness of the experience that it can provide for us and that it can be. That one also conditions most of us these days. And it's our role in really ridding ourselves of all this negative programming and actually to rediscover for the first time in our lives what sexuality actually is, to really see, feel, and experience the sacredness of this expression of our bodies, of our senses, of our intimate union with another. And to break through all of these things and these limitations, this programming, these suppressed emotions, and all of these things is a journey. And I walked through that journey myself, and I will share how to go through from having problems in your sexual expression, from having this addiction to ejaculation, maybe even addiction to porn, and all these limiting things showing up, to go from that to a fully empowered and beautiful expression of your sexuality, to be able to really experience these beautiful, pure, and incredibly satisfying connections with your partner and yourself. So for that whole transformational journey, stay tuned for my upcoming online course. I'm going to announce that in the podcast and on my Instagram. So definitely stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes or updates on that. And I would like to share one thing with our listeners, Kelly, and that is one exercise that you shared with me and with the Man at Man Tribe that really helped me to reconnect to the primal nature of my body and to release stuck emotions and to really be grounded and present. And I'd love for you to speak into that one.
Are you talking about the Primal Scream, or?
I'm talking about the Primal Scream, yes.
Okay, yeah, just making sure. I was like, which one? Yeah, okay, got it. Yeah,
Sure.
so, absolutely, and as I stated earlier, energy is a divine expression. It's, it's never wrong or bad. It just is. And the energy expressed through our emotions isn't wrong or bad. It just is. And when I experience anger, particularly as a man, that the expression of that creates a lack of safety for the people that I'm around. And so I don't exist in a vacuum. I acknowledge that I have a need to express my anger and express my rage. And at the same time, that expression can create a society where people feel unsafe. So I have to find safe ways to express that. And the Primal Scream is really just one of those ways of expressing the anger that is so underexpressed. As men, we find all kinds of ways to express it because it needs to be expressed. And sometimes that's sarcasm. That's the intellectuals version of unchecked rage. I make a lot of smart jokes and talk shit about you without really saying anything specific that I can always weasel out of. Sarcasm is what socialites, the high tail version of us do. But some of us strike out and lash out and hit people. Sometimes we are angry and loud and violent in other ways, and use our body in ways that intimidate people to feel that to feel the expression of that anger. And so the Primal Scream is really just a simple exercise that anyone can do in any place. I say any place, meaning that I take into consideration who's around me, but I can always grab a pillow if I need to and throw that in front of my face. Or a car works perfect. When I can, I try to get out in nature. I do it outside my front porch. My neighbors just know it's me at this point. It's Kelly again. It's very simple. It's just basically plant my feet on the ground and really start to breathe in and connect to the earth and really feel myself weighted to this ground. And imagine like there were roots growing out of my feet, really anchoring me to this ground and feeling the energy and just breathing into that. And then as I'm breathing into the base root core, into my dantian and down to through my solar plexus and really drawing the energy from there. that's where I'm going to release the energy from. And I'm releasing that energy from that base, from the root, up and out through my crown, really. It's important that when I'm doing a primal scream, I'm not screaming from my throat or even really from my chest. It begins of energy boiling down from the center. And then it's just opening up the channel and releasing it. And allowing the anger to cleanse out the vessel, to allow it to just scrub it out and let out anything that's stuck so that I don't have to carry it. And it's just a cleansing. It's a kriya, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's it. So I breathe into that root, and on a count of 3, release it out with a full scream, shake my body, beat my chest if I need to, jump up and down, whatever feels right to come through. And as it comes through, I just check in with, did anything come to me as that scream came out? Did I get any themes or ideas or people, or is there anything that was connected to that I get to check in with at a later time? Oh, there's something there that I didn't realize that I was angry about. Good to see that. I get to check in with that. But that's the primal scream. A way to really allow myself to move that energy, and without it having to be. And I'll be in conflict sometimes and like, you know what, I need to step away. As I was going through my divorce, we would do collective family scream, primal screams. I'd say, okay, guys, all right, everybody pause for 1 second. All right, let's open up the windows, open the doors. We all need to take a primal scream, and me and my wife and our 4-year-old would stand, and we'd scream out the wall. It's like energy just needs to move. We're noticing that it's showing up, and it gets to move. And now my 4-year-old, he'll do them. He's so accustomed to it. He'll just stop in like in the middle of something.
That's beautiful, though. That's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Kelly. Amazing. And that is really what I see. This exercise I really see as a powerful way of us reconnecting to our bodies, to our primal nature, to our power, really. Yeah. That might often expressing itself through anger. But I just had this funny image come to my mind from the movie Fight Club. Do you know that when they like test the people, how they're like so like softened down and like afraid to express their anger, and they like spill water on them, and they just like with like a hose on the street, like to show like how people are so disconnected from their power and their and their bodies, and like just like speaking up and standing up for themselves. And
yeah, you said that in a really good way, because it's not just anger, and I did focus on anger a bit, but it's expression of all of that. The scream is more than just anger. It's really the expression of my full embodied self. And dancing is another great way of doing this. Just getting out and trance dancing, or allowing my body to just move to sound is extremely healing to embody that. And so, just the embodiment of the movement of that energy is incredibly cleansing and freeing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And that is also what is so essential in really experiencing, you can call it tantric sex, or just like this authentic sexual, sensual connection between two human beings, is to not be in that space we're conditioned to be in our minds and how we should perform, like, look like, do anything, literally, but to really get that out of the way and to be in that direct embodiment of our spirit in our body, and to let that express itself on its own, literally. And that we're often held back by shame, by being even afraid to let our bodies just express themselves however they want, and all of these things that are that it might be in the way. I really experienced a powerful transformation, like myself, really reconnecting that and claiming that animal body of mine back and allowing it to be. Like the primal scream, how you just described it, it is literally like a lion's roar from like its gut, like literally bringing that power out of our animal body. And that is what I feel super essential in experiencing that, because then all we need to be is literally just that, being with another person. And our genitals have their own intelligence, our bodies have their own intelligence. We don't have to try to do or perform anything. The magic is literally happening once we get out of the way and we're present with each other.
Yeah. The word surrender just keeps coming up for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do I get to surrender into that experience? Into the wisdom of this earth, of my body,
Yeah.
the cosmic wisdom that exists around us all. I was doing a vision quest out in the desert last month, and one of the things that came to me as I was out there is, this notion that we often talk about, having language is what makes us superior animals. Right? We have this language that we can communicate in a way, makes us superior to most other animals that can't, and in our cognition and all of these other pieces. But I was also really struck with the idea that this language that I have is disconnecting me from the language that everything else is already speaking.
Yes.
When I'm out there in the nature and there's another language that everything is surrendered to, they're a part of, they're tending to those threads of connection that go far beyond my language. And so, this language is the very masculine, active principle of shaping the world as I want it to be, but engaging the feminine principle of surrender to be with the world as it is. That's the sweetness, that's the beauty.
Yeah.
That I think of as you speak of that experience of sex and sexuality is for, as a man, really finding my surrender to the wisdom of my body and my ancestors of the divine.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good point to start wrapping it up. I love that, and that is really such an essential foundation of loving like a king, so to say, to literally, if we connect that, especially also to sex, is to find the way to decondition ourselves from that programming, to break through these blockages and fears and suppressed emotions, and to really reconnect to our animal body and let it express itself, to see that our flesh, our physical body, is just as sacred as our soul. It is not anything less than that. Even if it farts, poops, pees, fucks, whatever it wants to do, all of that is sacred if it is expressed in a pure way. So to just own that. And and it also, like we said, we are coming from a space of being conscious men, of being connected to our emotions and our hearts, to working through our traumas and what has hurt us so that we may not hurt others. And from that space, we are literally serving God through love. And my favorite way of doing that is through sex. So that's
it just
why
sounds so easy. Of course,
like,
but of course, it is the best way to do that. And
it
yes,
is one of the ways.
Yeah, well, it is, and I'm a full-throated yes to a sex-positive society. And one thing that really came up to me that I wanted to say this before we leave. For the first chapter of my sexual life, I thought that sex was about pleasing someone else, and that my goal was to find a way to get my partner to orgasm as frequently as possible. And that meant that I was good, that I was doing a good job at being a sexual partner. But as I looked back at my life, it's also how I did everything else in my life. Giving away was my value. Doing for others was my value. But receiving and allowing myself to receive that pleasure is really that space of kingdom.
Yeah.
The king shows other people how to stand in their own king by receiving the blessings. And so, I say that that's the biggest learning that I'm having about kingship and or chiefdom, or whatever languaging you want to use around that. There's all kind of paternalism built
Yeah.
into kingship, which we acknowledge, but the real experience of that is learning to receive and be with a lover, and be with the energy of life and love, and not to have to. A prince makes it happen. A king allows it to happen.
Yes, I think that one land. That is it. Yeah. Yes, beautiful. So Kelly, I just have one last question for you.
All right, go for
Wrap
it.
this one up. So
Okay.
if you would imagine, like you had to leave the planet tomorrow, what would that one message be that you would leave behind?
It's interesting as I think about that. It's like there's so many different quotes, famous quotes that I want to land here in a
I'm
way of.
talking about the famous Kelly Gardner. That's the one
I know.
want to hear.
I know. I've got so many, but really, I think the more important piece, is what's written on the wall right now, and what I really spoke about earlier, which is love. If there's one thing, that there's two things. I'd say there's two things that I really want every man on this planet to find a deeper connection with. There's many layers. There's always a deeper place that I can go. But if men in particular can find a deeper connection with these two things, it would make the whole world a better place. And the first is compassion. Compassion for myself and compassion for those around me. To recognize that we are all the same, all making the same mistakes or different mistakes, having the same life experience and fucking it up along the way. To just have compassion for that. And the second is to really connect with my own unique expression of love. How do I serve this world through the discovery of what I am really here to contribute? And in discovering that, really find the path to my own fulfillment and my own joy. The world needs that more than ever. It needs men who have greater compassion for themselves and others, and a deep sense of fulfillment in offering their unique gifts to this world. All the rest of it will work itself out.
Yeah.
Because that'll also create the space for the rise of the feminine. That we are responsible for holding up as well. I stand here on the backs of many women that have held me high. And for those women to stand nearly as high, to stand as high as they were intended to do, I also have to lean down and hold them up. So that's part of the process. I don't know if there's a quote in there, but that's what I want men to know.
That is gold. So thank you so much for being here today, Kelly. Super grateful to have met you and for having being in space, in a common space with you, and to be held space for, and to really learn from you also. And I met you in Man Tribe.
First of all, it was such a pleasure working with you. And for those of you out there, I want the listeners to know that Max is just an incredibly committed individual, and the work that you did in there just really stood out to me in your commitment to the work. It's consistency over time is where I see the greatest development. It's been such a pleasure to work with you in that space, and to see how you're flourishing and developing your own coaching and your own sexual mastery practice and offering that to other people, and now this podcast. And it really lights me up to see. I have deep gratitude for all of that.
Thank you. Where can people find more out about you, Kelly?
You can find more about me on my website, kellygardner.com. I also, as you mentioned earlier, a filmmaker. I've been working on a couple of documentary projects through my company, Community Gardner, and that's really about creating, laying down those seeds throughout communities to build sustainable communities that serve their own individual and their collective purposes. So whether that's through storytelling or through groups, however I can be a part of that, or collaborate with other individuals to facilitate that mission, that purpose. Please reach out to me on Community Gardner on Instagram or my webpage at kellygardner.com.
Thank you, Kelly. It was a pleasure to have you on here.
Thank you, brother.
See you
Talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining us for the Heart of a King podcast. Make sure to follow the podcast and turn on your notifications so you won't miss out on any new episodes coming out.